Hello, hello, Felix. How are you today and where are you dialing from?
Hi there, Kate. Wonderful. I feel quite good. It's pretty dark here. I'm calling in from Singapore.
Wonderful. Well, I know it's already 11 p.m. for you, so I really appreciate you dialing in today for my hot seat session. The purpose of this session is to help, companies or entrepreneurs all over the globe to address their blind spots and gain competitive edge with help of our mentors. Before we start with our topic, I'd like to let our audience know that we welcome your questions, and if you have anything to ask, feel free to type it in chat, and by the end of the session, we'll get back to you to answer them. And before we proceed to the topic, we would like to get to know Felix Lee. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm getting on in age, and basically, I'm Felix Lee, architect. I'm currently AI architect for systems and workflow for to empower creative professionals and entrepreneurs to be able to up their game and uh, get a leap using AI into the creative field. So you think like digital art, producers for movies, shorts, and Web3 components, stuff like that.
Thank you. So today, this is a really, creative presentation of you, which is pretty much connected to the topic that we're going to talk today, which is lateral thinking, which is also equals design thinking. And I know that you've prepared some presentation, if I'm allowed to start sharing it, right?
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay. And my first question to you is, of course, what is the difference between lateral thinking, and conventional problem solving approaches? What kind of benefits it offers when you try to solve complex problems?
Okay, well, the most obvious that's very good question and the most common question that I've actually been faced with. First of all, you have to understand the definition of creative thinking first. And creative thinking, lateral thinking, design thinking, they belong to the same family, actually. If you try to dissect it, it's pretty hard because it's not tangible and it's not pretty much a research nor science paper. You'd find that probably the best way to describe it. I mean, we have a little slide here saying that there's no order in Tom Yum soup. So I'll just jump into it rather than dissect the subject. Tom Yum soup, if all of you have actually tasted, experienced it, um, looks like it's a hot pot of a whole lot of stuff thrown in there, cooked into soup and served. But the reality of it is it's not quite there. You can't make good tom yum soup if there's more than 6 bowls of soup in that pot. You can't sort of keep it overnight and try and change that or change the ingredients. It doesn't work. And most people would have three different comments about it. They'd say it's too sour, they say it's too sweet, they say it's too saltish, and it smells of lemongrass. Now, the reality of it is the person who put it together didn't put all of that in the pot at the same time. But by putting it differently, in a certain way, you actually bring out all the flavors, and that's supposed to represent Thailand. It is the Thai national dish per se. So there is no order, but there is order in disorder. So let's flip the slide over to the next one. I want to address the fact that you have got people telling us whether a problem is a problem. Now, the best way to describe lateral thinking is to see a parallel version of yourself in the metaverse, for example, and but that person is here with you all the time, sitting in your brain and giving you little nudges, little clues, little pieces of what you think your problems are. So if you go through a standard project, they'll say, "Is it a problem? Look at the big picture. How many stakeholders are actually in it? Who's paying to solve it? And what spin-offs are there that make better sense?" Now, those are very literal, natural, but linear thinking processes in a fairly simplified, rote ordered system. Now, so everybody thinks they know the what, but very few really want to know the why. And they wouldn't bother to find out why. Let's see what we have on the next one. If you So I'm actually diving into the subject, but I told Kate actually I don't really want to dive into it because this should be a psychological exercise. It's not going to be an academic research paper. Um, and as I go through the anecdotes, you begin to see yourself unravel because you think you know what is normally printed on paper, and that basically dictates how you think. And the schools academic processes have actually conditioned you in a neuro-linguistic program style to think in a certain way, but actually you haven't discovered the other side. The fact is, your subconscious and your creative side never really gets exposed. So you see a typical problem on the left, you see symptoms that come up with the problem. And as I was asked, is it systemic or is it technical? Because systemic is human nature, technical could be a challenge with material or something else. Now, lateral is your creative side of your psyche, and there is no exam for that, and there is no exercise per se. You're often ignored over your technical skills because technical skills are certified by paper. And if you don't have a paper, your creativity cannot be measured, nor your obverse side of your brain assessed for whether it's able to do problem solving. Now, unfortunately, research and rote often biases this discussion because the first thing they say is, "Oh yeah, right. So what are your qualifications, man? Let's take a look at that." And I think that's not a very good judge of character per se. It's always also undervalued as a skill because the skill to solve a problem is not the technical expertise. It's the way you look at the problem. Okay, so the human resource attached to it has no qualification, certification, or label for such a skill. Now, if you look on the left screen, that's how people see things on black and white. And it's mostly literal, it's mostly systematic, and it's in a straight linear process. Now, what if you decided to change it a little bit? Can we go to the next slide? So you see this very common. You see the one, two, three, and the four, and they'll tell you this is how you get creative, and this is the creative process. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that because your mind's not designed in this manner. Your mind has never been designed in this manner, but you are told and conditioned to believe that this is the way your mind should be working. Now, if you look at the next slide, I'm again addressing it because lateral is not a process. Lateral is also not biased by people. And the simulation form, I'll come back to that in a minute, is mostly restricted to job descriptions. Now, you look at all the job descriptions for human resource, they can obviously easily be mined by artificial intelligence or large language processes because they contain all the common words and descriptions that label you, and that's based on the academic structure. Now, also, lateral is not fixed, it's not finite, and it's not circular. It's infinitum. So if you imagine that you are a cook, and the French have got this right actually, they do slow cooking. I can't remember the term, but if you slow cook an egg, let's just take a simple thing that you would do tomorrow. You slow cook an egg. If you try to get the water to boiling first, and then you put the egg in, the egg will cook on the outside and stick to the shell. And then you'll find that the outside of the egg is cooked, but the inside is raw. And that tells you you actually really haven't cooked the egg. However, I don't care if it's hard boiled. If it's hard boiled, you don't really care, right? So, but if it's not, and you wanted it sort of just half boiled, nice and juicy and floppy and fluffy, you'd have to do a slow cook. Sure, it takes a little bit more time, and the temperature goes from low to high. You don't have to boil it. The egg follows the temperature as it goes along and reaches 70 degrees centigrade. Got it? Better write it down. 70 degrees centigrade, and you stop. And that's your perfect half boiled egg. All right? So let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the most common thing about science. They will try to dissect the brain and tell you where each piece of your brain and how it works, but they'll never tell you how to use it. You notice that? They tell you this wonderful description about the brain. They tell you where all the things are, where all the stuff is, but they'll never ever tell you how to use it.
It's
And
probably
believe
most
it,
of my experience at school, actually. You
yes,
know what is it, but not how and why.
but you never question, right? No one questions it. They just say, well, all I need to do is to say it does that, and I'm good. And everybody believes me because I say it does that. And everybody agrees that they should say that because it does that, right? So we think it does that. But do you really know? No one actually really knows, right? Until you experience it for yourself. So so I had the opportunity to meet up with a very um, polymathic, I'm polymathic too, person. He was very active, and I would say even in typical of a cult leader, but he's a scientist, he's a doctor, he's a PhD, but in AI robotics, but he's spiritual, but he's not structured because he's also a movie producer, and therefore he has to create movies regarding technology, etc., and create characters. Like for example, in Star Trek, he was involved in Star Trek. So different types of characters and races. He created the Bog, and he was and today he's saying, "I'm trying to do the Hive," and I said, "Oh my God!" So you're trying to have pervasive consciousness across the universe. He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, okay, we haven't even defined neutrinos yet," but he says, "Yeah, why not?" I said, "I agree. Why not? If no one's ever tried, why should you say it's not possible, right?" So and I was telling him, I said, "I'm gonna, you know, so which part of the brain are you?" And he's doing robotics and he's building a robot called Biomi, and it's not designed like all robots. It's different because he designed it from the brain down. But the other people design it by making the limbs and all that. That's basically automation. And he wants his robot to think, not just do think. So it will learn by itself. And it has different parts like the frontal probe, the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, occiput. But he says, you know what lobe is missing? He said the emotional lobe is missing. He says, look at the brain. Where is the emotional lobe? There's no emotional lobe. Everybody thinks the brain only does this, but where's the emotion? And when you ask a scientist, you say, "Oh, it comes from generally all of this together." And that's not explaining anything at all, really, actually. So, do we have another one? Another slide? Yeah. Okay. So all right. So, what does that lead us to? Um, I always often quote Ouroboros and infinitum because in Ouroboros, there's only one end to this cycle. You actually end up going in circles, but at the same time, you're eating your own tail. So it's a self-destructive mode of pursuing this method of thinking. At the end of the day, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're going to raise more doubts, and there are no solutions. But I prefer the infinitum concept because infinitum can go in different directions. On Ouroboros, you only have the snake eating the tail. That's obviously linear, singular direction. In infinitum, there is no direction. It floats in all directions. And at any point, it can stop and change direction. So therein lies why people tend to use Scrum and all the rest, because you don't get tied to time and you don't get tied to space, and you can start where you end or start at the end. So, is there another slide after this? Let's see. Yeah. So okay. So I try to tell people I have basically five rules because I only have five fingers, so it's really easy to count. I don't have to remember anything, and if I have any problems, I'll just write them in tiny little words, like they do in prison, but not quite the same. But and I can remember it. So first thing is I tell people time is life and life is time. If you haven't figured it out, you will. Younger people tend to think that they have limitless time and a life of like maybe 2,000 years. So yeah, so somebody said Hitler said he wanted the Aryan race to go on for 1,000 years. It's a 1,000-year dynasty. So obviously that didn't turn out his way. But life is time, and time is life. So as soon as you recognize that, you begin to understand the meaning of purpose of life, right? It's one part. So the other thing I set myself to do to solve any problem, is 3 minutes, 3 days, or 3 weeks. Why? Because in 3 minutes, it's about the optimum attention span for a thought. If you're consuming TikTok videos, your attention span could be like maybe 3.5, 5 seconds. Okay. But if you create a TikTok video, you want to create one, and optimum would be about 3 minutes. And you think in 3 minutes, you'd either figure out the storyline, or 3 minutes, what you want to communicate across, or so and so forth. Or you want to do a full production, you do 3 days or 3 weeks. But if you put these little tags on your timeline, you begin to understand that time is life and life is time. So, what do you want to do in your 3 minute life, your 3 day life, or your 3 weeks life? Now, if you don't believe me, you can write down in your little journal all the things that you thought you want to do. Like, oh, okay, I got to feed the dog. That's 3 minutes. Okay, I got to clean the shed. Oh, that's 3 days. Or look, I've got to get my act in order and clean the house. That's 3 weeks. You can't turn around and say, okay, I can do this in 1 week, because 1 week's a bit too short for time to think, consider, digest, and then operate physically. Now, the action doesn't come until you decide to think. Now, I used to I used to be able to, or rather, people used to ask me, would you spend more time thinking or doing? And I would say, okay, I would spend more time thinking first. Then I would spend time making mistakes doing it. Now, the reason is, first, logically, people do this. Therefore, this happens. But since I'm doing something new, like innovation, some innovation, some new creation, invention, or some new process, I would obviously have to find out who made all the stupid mistakes first. Now, this is very important, because in a polytechnic which I taught, there was this very strong intellectual discussion over, among all the lecturers. They would say, "Oh, how's this? Is every cohort as stupid as the last one?" Now, a lot of you will identify with this for one simple reason, because you take on interns, you take on employees, and you take on new people, and then you say, okay, I want the human resource manager will say, oh, I want someone who's like 25, who's got 10 years working experience, and this and that. And you find that that is impossible. It's impossible. But they like to raise the bar. But if you want to raise the bar to impossible, then you're not going to get what you want. And you're never going to be happy getting that staff or that crew or the person. And you'll never ever be happy with that person. And your company will never be ever be happy thinking that you promise them Superman, and somebody just walks in and says, I'm the Flash, but I can't run. That doesn't work, right? So obviously you think about it, and then we came to this conclusion, and actually I put this conclusion forward. I said, uh, while all the professors said, yeah, they're just as dumb as the last batch. And I said, well, I think the definition of dumb needs to work. The reason for that is because they haven't heard the mistakes of the last batch, right? But if they heard the mistakes of the last batch, I don't think they're going to make the same mistakes in this batch. And you know how PhDs work, right? Every time the PhD graduates, the leftover research goes back to the next PhD student, right? And researchers, right? And then they are supposed to incrementally improve it and push it to tier one papers so that they can get published. So that person is at a slight disadvantage, because someone's done 3 quarters of it and they think they can fill the last quarter. But if they try to do that, they will not get their PhD, because it's similar to the last guy. So what you want to do is you want to question the last guy's PhD, because you're continuing the research of the professor, right? The professor is the constant. And if you are going to improve on it further, it's got to be not incremental. It's got to be drastic. He may even oppose his structure, but at least you get your PhD in a different way, right? So I said, the next batch that comes in, we won't throw them into the books yet. Let's give them 3 weeks to study the journals of all the mistakes from the last batch. And the 3 weeks was well worth it, because after we tried it 2 to 3 cohorts, the cohorts got smarter and smarter and smarter, and the products got better and better. We were designing the metaverse. And I can tell you, wow, by the time the third or fourth cohort came in, the girls were doing makeup on day three on the avatars. And I'm like, girls, aren't you supposed to get into the sprite and all that? Says, oh, that can come later. Uh, uh, we can pick this up for the boys because they've got all the stuff done. And the last batch did most of it correctly, but some of this wrong. The boys will correct the mistakes in a few weeks, and we'll learn from them. But in the meantime, we want to play with makeup. So the girls were doing makeup on the avatars, and the guys were basically recorrecting, adjusting all the mistakes, and therefore you can get smarter cohorts rather than dumber cohorts. So that's how progress works, right? So the other thing is this. um, I don't know how many of you have experienced, well, I'm sure all of you have dreams. I mean, sleep, dreams in your sleep. I'm sure you've got dreams in your sleep, right? I dream in color, so it's quite unusual, but it's quite common to me. So if you have a problem that you can't solve, you want to write it down in a concise manner, like a small little card, and you want to put it in your wallet, and you want to stare at it, and you want to stick it next to your bed, and you want to sleep on it. Because when you do that, your subconscious takes over. Your brain currently is in, according to one of the researchers, only 30% used today. So you haven't touched the other 70%. And if you multiply that by two, your sleep, your subconscious is the other 100% you never really ever touched. So if you apply the problem to your subconscious, it will give you an answer. But you got to listen to the subconscious. So a lot of people ignore their subconscious. So they say, what is the meaning of my dream? Think about it. It's not, they think all dreams are emotional, but it's not necessarily true. Dreams actually can be technical. And actually, I'll give you an example. Um, they were building the MRT in Singapore, otherwise the mass rapid transit in Singapore when they first started. Um, and I was consulting Gammon. Gammon is a construction company, tunneling and all that. And you know, when they miss deadlines, if they don't make the deadlines, they'll get fined. Well, okay, they will get a fine, and that fine basically for late delivery of whatever it is. There is a term for that. It just escaped me for a bit, and it was very close to that time. Oh, LD, liquidated damages. You will be sued by the owner of the line for liquidated damages if you do not meet the deadline. Those are in probably about half a million a day, bucks per day. And when it came very close to delivering this section of the transit on this particular area, which was made of iron oxide dust soil. So we call it Red Hill because it's red because of iron oxide, and the soil is so fine that water just slips right through it, um, and it's totally unstable. It cannot take a double decker bus. The weight of a double decker bus, it cannot take. Now, an MRT, a train section is more than a few tons, probably around 8 to 10 tons a piece to get there. And a bus is probably only maybe 2.5 tons, I'm guessing, thereabouts, or 3 tons. So that road can no longer be used for a crane to carry a tunnel section on that point. And they realized that they had made a mistake saying that they could make this deadline, because they actually never solved this problem until they realized the soil was unstable. So just treat it like mud, for example. You can't drive a truck through mud to put a 10-ton piece of tunnel in there. And I was privileged to have a guy called Chris Randall from UK, one of the engineers, um, and my job was to aid him while be his attaché while in Singapore. And obviously, the Brits love beer, and I love beer, so we were in a pub, and in that pub, in like about 2 hours, we solved this problem. We solved this problem. We created a train track, a train delivered railway track that could carry another track. So we would just not touch this place at all with any cranes at all. We will use the track, and we build the track, and we built it from the top down, not from the bottom up. So you get a train track in there, you build the train section downwards, and then the train track continues and lowers another track, and so on and so forth. And that all came from cowboys and Indians, and we were like arguing over how was the Wild Wild West one, etc., etc. And people, and how did the railway began to cross the United States. Now, the other thing is that laws and rules can be bent. Nobody asks you to break the laws of physics, of Newton, of friction, etc., but you can bend it. And today, it's more obvious than other times. You can see people trying solar sails, people trying to do tunneling. It's not just Tesla, but there are tunneling companies who are trying to do high-speed rail underground using tunnels, using air to do it, and magnetism. And you can see alternative methods of thinking through things. For example, Segway. For example, people applying thinking over to different types of physics that did not that were previously said to be undone. That's happening. They're now looking at neutron to power stuff, and AI actually something that was discredited in early days, but it's just visualizing something from text, which was basically built on a translation engine and a mass of data, which we will suck up and regurgitate in a different form. The other thing is design is an art. Um, it looks contradictory in that sense, maybe paradoxical, but the art of the design is quite an interesting thing. If you see somebody like, say, Picasso taking a brush and just making a specific stroke, or a famous calligraphist, doing a watercolor, you no machine can do it. But that art isn't always recognized. Some artists, you get $5 for the painting. You can go and buy one from the alleyway down in your tourist belt for $5, oil painting. Or if you do recognize the talent and the skill in that stroke, you could pay $1 million for it. Anyone know? No one actually knows how much that skill is, because no one's actually bothered to try to put a price to it, right? You're just guessing. I think it's worth $1 million. Right, 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 right. And everybody says, yeah, right. Okay, let's pay $1 million. So anyone can also choose and create. Then on the fifth point is there is always a solution. Always and always a solution. The way that I solve problem is to find the solution first and then find the problem from the back. If you find the problem, you'll be restricted by language. And language pretty much is a finite thing, but your brain is worth more than, uh, you know, permutations of billions of permutations that your synapses can come up with options. But if you keep thinking that only people have done it in this way, and this is the only way it works, then you'll be thinking, how else can I do it after this way? But the reality is that that's not what you're trying to solve. If you have the end game in mind and you think, when I'm done, this can do this and this and this and this, you could be building a better product than what the guy asked you to do. And if you do that, why work for him? Work for yourself. Do something different. I think right now, perhaps I don't have any more slides after this, I guess. So,
No, no, and so it's like we are almost like 30 minutes into talking, so maybe we can devote some time to answering questions. So you can wrap up so we have some
okay,
time for
okay,
questions.
okay. I'd like to share a couple of stories actually. a couple of anecdotes, and actually I had 10, but I'm going to cut this down. I um okay, I some of you have drunk and tasted a drink called Guinness Draft, and Guinness Draft um, used to be called Guinness Stout, and Guinness Stout had 8% alcohol and was extremely bitter. It wasn't very creamy. So a lot of Guinness's real customers, which were blue collar workers and workers in the docks and all the people who needed strength to do their jobs, were actually dying literally because they had reached about 75, 80 years old, and that generation was of Guinness stout drinkers were actually really dying. And my client came to me and said, if we let this continue, we are out of a job, we're out of business. You've got to do something, come up with something interesting. And I said, wow, that's easy. That's for headquarters to figure out why ask me. And but one day I discovered that I saw five women drinking 3 jugs of Guinness, and I was like, man, I think that's Coke, right? So I walked up to them and I said, girls, you look cute and gorgeous. I'm not trying to pick you up, but is that Guinness? And they said, yeah, it is. I said, okay, right. So there are five women and there are like 4 jugs of Guinness. Right. Where are the guys? Oh, it's a girls' night out. I said, oh my God. I said, okay, now I need to ask you another question. So you girls are all drinking Guinness at the same time when all the other girls are drinking cocktails, champagne and all that, and the girls don't like beer generally. Well, some of them don't because it makes them feel really bloated. So I said, and what's the reason? And they said, oh, we're all having it's all at the same time. And I was like, and I figured it out. They were having their period at the same time. So I said, okay, so why Guinness? They said, oh, if we took Guinness 3 days before our period, we'll not get cramps. I'm like, really? But there are five women there, and I can't disagree with that. So I went back and I told my client, I said, we should target women. And that night I dreamt, and I dreamt that night, it was like, oh, got milk? There's a TV commercial in the States where the women drink milk and they have this white mustache on them and they say, got milk? I'm like, man, what was I thinking? And I told the client, I says, yeah, we'll target the women, but we need to just alter the formulation a little bit. We want to cut the alcohol down from 8% to 5, like beer, but we find a way to get it less bitter? Then my client was like, are you nuts? You're trying to change formulation? Then I told her, are you nuts? If everybody's dying, who else is going to drink that drink? So she sent me to Ireland to this big two black doors where they brew that, and the nice fat brewmaster came and told me, he says, oh hey, come on, yeah, tell me. So I told him, I said, this is what we need to do, and that was how Guinness Draft was born. Guinness Draft is 5%. It's now called, in some countries they call it Guinness beer, but it's actually Guinness Draft. You'll notice they use nitrogen, so there's no carbon dioxide. Women don't feel very bloated because nitrogen comes off as you breathe, so doesn't get stuck in the stomach. The second thing is 5% alcohol, and because of the nitrogen, doesn't taste bitter. So that's a wonderful thing. Uh, and we targeted women. So because I told them if women drink it, the men would. I mean, why are you drinking Corona beer? It sucks. You know, and when this happened, the thing took off. And I think in your country, you'd find that Guinness Draft is pretty much accepted by women for a change. And that's how you revive the entire brand. I think that was one of my key contributions to your life somewhere out there if you are drinking this. But just to finish off someone did ask me, he said, what what makes you who you are? And I'm a polymath, and I do very strange things. I do things like dismantle and reassemble puzzles like this. This is a puzzle of a real puzzle of a molecule. Okay, this is a molecule, right? And you take it apart, and I challenge you to put it back again, piece by piece. It's not easy, all right? It's not easy. So the human body and our brains are made of molecules. It's really not easy. And the other thing is that when COVID came in and we are under lockdown, I started dismantling watches, and I created this watch. And this is a perfect good timepiece, titanium. Is worth a few maybe some people say $2,000 or whatever it is, but I dived into chronology because I like little details and understanding how things work. And because I thought if you could understand how things work, uh, and an amazing thing is that this thing keeps time, and it tells you your 3 seconds, 3 minutes, and 3 weeks. And that's really fascinating to me. And I also indirectly realized that I happen to be the only guy in Asia when you type Google search looking for people who repair and restore model cars like these little very detailed and scaled model cars. They come to me, and I'm first on the search engine. But Google puts 10 ads in front of me, on top of me, and then after the 10th ad, you see me. I'm actually the first one, the real first response after the 10 ads, and that's me. So um, yeah, so they told me what else makes me. I said, well, I remember one of my heroes. An interesting thing to think. One of my heroes was Mr. Graham, Dr. Graham, a physics teacher of mine when I was 15, and he had a hair like Fido Dido, and he was a boffin for Barnes Wallace. And for those of you who know Barnes Wallace, he's the guy who did Dam Busters, Bouncing Bomb, and he had fascinating stories, and he taught physics in a very interesting way. He said, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" And we said, "No, we all know this answer, right? To get to the other side." He says, "No, no, no. It's a different thing. It was rainy. The coefficient of friction on the road was so and so. The earth was having this was summertime and was very hot. So humidity and the chicken was very hot. And as it rained, the chicken had a bath that morning, and his feathers were all wet. And he had to cross the road because the cars were going opposite direction at how many kilometers per hour. So it wasn't the simple answer. It was a complex decision to do that. And I guess that really stuck with my brain over the years, that people could always simplify a problem, but that's not really the problem. They're trying to do something else. They just don't know what. So if you can figure out what the final product is and use your lateral thinking skills that are three-dimensional and multi-dimensional, you could solve the problem or invent a solution rather than solve the problem. So okay, that's enough for me. I think I'm out of time, right? Before cake
Yes,
kills.
absolutely. But I'm actually really surprised that you know, there like no questions. People are mostly just agreeing with you because they look at their
Wait, I don't see
experience.
anything.
You should be able to see the chat actually to the left, right? No?
No, I can see. Okay, no, I can't see anything. Oh, okay, okay, I
Oh,
get
yeah.
it. I see the little screen on the right now. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so we
Um,
have really interesting question that creative intelligence often undervalues and underestimated. People agree with that. What an analogy with the egg. I like
yes,
the comment from David. I worked for Guinness in
yes,
Dublin. They
yes,
invented the V-Jet so it can be
yes,
canned.
yes.
And people
This is
argue
not a widget. This is the formulation, David. It's not a widget. It's a formulation. Yeah,
and
the widget works beautifully. It used to be stuck to the bottom of the can, and then later they spent I think £1 million to patent that thing, and then all Kilkenny and all that start using it, and then now it's a little ball that goes around all the place, less efficient, but there was a specific way to open the can when the widget is at the bottom. You have to turn it upside down into the glass and pull, and then you get a surge. That stupid surge machine today is really crappy. Um, yeah, it's been great. That was
yes,
Dublin. Yes,
the comment from Gayatri, who agreed that many people ignore the subconscious when in fact it's the resource for decision making and making choices. And from Dion, I really like that the session has been so incredibly eye opening. So this is a compliment for you, Felix.
great, great. Actually, I want to address the subconscious again for one reason. Um, I'll give everybody a challenge. This one simple challenge you can do yourself, and I promise you, your whole entire life will change if you can do this. Okay, when you are dreaming, look at your toes. Okay,
You mean in a dream?
in
Try
the
to.
dream, Look at your toes. Try to remember what you're wearing. Is it sandals? Are you barefoot? Is it on the sand? Etc. I promise you, the day you can see that, your life will change. Really.
It is a challenge. It is a challenge for the
Yes.
audience.
Yes. That's an interesting challenge.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Felix. I even remember I wanted to ask a couple more questions, but you were able to unfold everything by yourself just with the help of a couple of slides. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. Again,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. And if our audience enjoyed this conversation with Felix, of course, I encourage you to check the caption and see how you can personally work with Felix to help you with your design thinking. So thank you, Felix. And I know it's really late for you, so I'm letting you go.
No, don't let me go. I wish to stay this anonymously. Don't let me go that easily.
I'll be back. You'll be back.
Oh, wow, wow. I heard that one before. Okay, great. I think the audience has been great, even though it's been very silent. And yeah, I just started seeing all these little pieces appearing. Appreciate the time. Thank you for your assistance, Kate. Wonderful for Gleek to be here, and I'm one of the
Absolutely.
mentors. And okay, I'm always available. Just give me a call at any time. Just flag me out.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good
Already
night,
night,
all.
even night for you. So
Right.
goodbye.
Pleasure